evening, depending on where you are joining us from. I would like to welcome you everyone on our webinar. And obviously, there is a reason why I greeted you in different time zones. You could be working from anywhere. After COVID, we had the opportunity to be able to work from anywhere, depending on, as long as we have the connectivity and all that. So I think at this point in time, I would like to welcome everyone. And as we want to start our webinar for the day, I would just do an introduction to the panelists that we have to try and, dissect this topic that we are talking about, gearing towards, the modern workplace. Some also have an idea of a workspace. Today, we shall be able to navigate through all that. And with me, we have Stacy, who is founder and director of Studio HR, which is a company that offers an end-to-end HR services from recruitment as well as bespoke services. And today she will be able to help us understand the comparison between the traditional workplace versus the modern workplace. And also joining us on this topic is Pitso Tsibolane, who is also a renowned researcher, senior lecturer at UCT, and also is not new to SAP. He has been involved with SAP for a number of years until 2015, 2016. Stand to be corrected on that. So he is going to take us through the role of technology in this paradigm shift that is taking place within workplaces, as far as workplace is concerned. I think at this point in time, I would like to call upon Stacy to take the stage and take us through what we have for the day. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for all being here today and attending this webinar. I'm excited to share some of my thoughts around this awesome topic. So give me a second while I just share here. Okay, so as I was introduced as the CEO and founder of HR Studio, I think the reality is that before 2020, pre-COVID, as we like to call it, everybody had a work environment and knew of this work environment that was office-based. So we would travel to work, we would come home from work early, we would go to work late, go to work early, come home from work late. We also had these water cooler conversations where people would come in and we would have office gossip. And there was a whole lot around, well, if I'm at the office, my managers definitely think I'm working, and this perception of my manager's there, so I feel supported. And there was a lot of this face-to-face interaction. So that was the world we knew. And for the 10% that did understand the virtual world, it was a lot easier for them to adapt when things happened. So then what happened? COVID happened, and we all had no choice but to go back to work. To go start working at home. And that came with a lot of anxiety. It came with a lot of challenges for not only employers, but also for employees. And the word of COVID was, we have to pivot, but nobody really knew what this meant. So from an HR perspective, it became something that we had to spend a lot of time being able to help people that own businesses or were in management roles to start stepping up into a leadership role, start understanding their people and start understanding, how am I actually going to get work done? How am I going to know that my staff are engaged? How am I going to keep them engaged? How am I going to be able to watch what they do? How do I monitor them? And all these questions started coming around. And then there was also the question of not only technology, but the people aspect of, how do I drive a culture? So then what came about was the boom of Zoom, Teams, Hangout meetings, voice notes, 50-page emails, all of this stuff around, let's try figure it out by continuously communicating. So people would go into meetings and then we'd have a meeting about a meeting, and it landed up becoming this whole unknown world. So we had to heavily rely on communication and different elements of communication. And what happened is by the time we had finished on 40,000 Zoom calls and read a 15 chain email, we went, hold on, it's 5 or 6 o'clock, and has anybody actually done any work? Because this wasn't like quickly just pop into an office. And then what happened is that people started working overtime or taking this unhealthy work-life balance, because I mean, there was no alcohol and cigarettes. So what was their option during level 5 lockdown? So people then started overworking, and it became a big problem around what we were referred to as Zoom fatigue, which was the burnout of cameras in front of our faces, and we'd become disengaged, and we'd be like, oh my God, I've got to sit in this meeting now, and do I even have to be here? So that became a world that everybody was trying to figure out. So let's just fast forward to sometimes during COVID, right? Where people actually now, as leaders, started to get to know their staff a bit better. And I think this picture shows it all, that you started to learn about your staff because they were in their territory. So a cat would jump into a Zoom, or a kid would pop in, and you would start to learn other elements about your staff that maybe you would have necessarily learned if you were sitting in the office. But I think a very valid point of where, as you can see, the man in this photo is sitting and going, can't believe I'm in this other Zoom meeting. But the reality was Zoom put a 40-minute allowance for free meetings, and afterwards the meeting got cut, which also started driving behavior. So instead of us just going into a meeting, we now started to have to bring in structures as leaders in businesses, structures around policies, around awesome technologies like Trello and Monday.com, and started bringing in structures to allow people to give them structure to become more efficient and manage their own time. So what I mean by that is that we would bring in policies around remote working. We would make sure that instead of just setting a meeting, we would have agendas. We would be able to go onto a system and pull out a report to see if work had been done, rather than just making the assumption. And the reality is that we also then had to start worrying about people and how they were actually handling life. So from an HR point of view, we started asking questions which we probably wouldn't have asked before around their mental health, so personally and work-wise, how people were doing. So let's now pop to where we are now, right? And I've spoken about a lot of the positivities that came out of this, but I think what a lot of companies also saw was that sadly there was some negativity. Sadly, there were a lot of people that were like, maybe if I don't log on, or I just turn on my computer, but I'm actually watching a great episode of Friends, they'll think I'm working. Where if I was at the office, I never would have done that. So sadly, then a lot of people who didn't know how to pivot or adapt, or wanted to test the boundaries, would land up actually putting themselves in horrible situations where HR had to then follow things like disciplinary processes, or companies as the employer that didn't know how to bring in systems or checks or all of these new world things landed up either having to retrench staff or liquidate. So let's skip to where we are now, right? 2.5 years later, currently in November 2022. And what's the reality is now we're looking at it and going, hold on, how do we manage this? So some companies are saying, let's return to work because it's great for our culture. But people are sitting there going, actually, I was very successful at home because my company supported me. They gave me the tools of trade. They gave me everything I needed. And they also gave me systems and platforms to be able to do what I need to and be successful at it. And the reality is that in the beginning of this year, a company by the name of Buffer did a work report from over 2,000 people in 16 different countries. And they found out that a lot of people, more than 50%, of 61%, actually would rather have worked at home because they had a better life balance. But that didn't mean that people going back to work were satisfied. So I've just come out of this massive area and era where I don't know if my job's going to be there tomorrow, so I better go back to work. And now what a lot of companies are seeing is they're going to start getting a larger staff turnover. Why? Because companies that were able to pivot and manage to do remote working or be able to offer a hybrid has given people the opportunity to go, maybe that's where I want to be working. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, is that all of this has taught us, and if you didn't learn this during COVID as a business owner, it all came down to trust. It came down to using the tools that this picture speaks about to be able to go in, do things effectively, have the technologies to support me, and then also making sure that we give direction to people, but including them, to make sure that their mental wellness is there and that their performance actually shows it. And as George said in this post, which I think was really powerful, companies that invest most in the digital transformation actually outperformed their peers over time. These companies are more prepared for disruptions, better able to monetize new digital channels, and better able to build a bigger user base. What's more, this phenomenon exists regardless of the industry. So it didn't matter what industry you're in. As human resources, we're all about people, but with the use of the right technology, we were able to go into this new era. First of all, save a lot of trees because we could do things digitally, and we didn't have to say, can you please come into the office? I need you to sign your contract, or we have a disciplinary inquiry. Let's go into a massive room so we can all sit 15 meters away from each other. We were able to use technology to our benefit. And what this also brought in, which was a great thing that for leaders that actually recognized it, is that it actually brought in a great level of confidentiality. So it couldn't be that sloppy administrator who left employee files on the table and everybody had access to see them. So I think the biggest message I'm saying is that great leaders were able to make sure that this worked. And if they were clever enough during this time, post-COVID now, there is no worry because they've put the fundamentals in place that support them, and it gives them the ability to now go and manage their business no matter where they are, where people are. But there's still an environment for those people that want to go into an office, the introverts versus the extroverts who miss that environment. So yeah, I think this is a really great topic, and I need to just thank Jacille for including me in this, because this is the way of the future. This is the new norm. And if you don't want to, if you're not going to fit in, then you're not going to need another pandemic to take your business out, sadly. So these things are available and we've all become used to them. We all use it on a cell phone. Why not bring it into our business and make sure that it can become impactful, not only for the service we're offering, but for the people that make our business what our business is, and those are our employees. So thanks, guys. That is my little bit of insight in this. For those of you that would like to see HR through my eyes, please go follow me on LinkedIn. I have added a few posts that the team will share with you afterwards around my view on how culture plays a massive part in employee engagement, and if you have the right systems, as well as the impact that remote working can have, both from a positive and a negative side. So thanks, guys. Thanks for letting me share.
Sorry, Peter, it's now your time.
All right. Thanks, Jacille. I hesitated a little bit there. Wasn't sure whether I jump in straight, but yeah, it's wonderful to see everyone, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Stacey, for that wonderful opening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the discussion, continue with the discussion that Tracy has so wonderfully laid out for us. And I would like to focus on the role of technology, as Jacille said at the beginning. So my name is Peter Tsibulani. I am a senior lecturer at the University of Cape Town, and I am also a primary investigator for a project, or a director for a project called Fair Work. and which is a collaboration that we do with Oxford University. And I have a great interest in workplace and the ideas that drive, the modern workplace looks like and what it should look like. But I've got a specific interest in how to make it better. So I spend a lot of my time looking at the things that technology gives to us that enable us to look or to improve the workplace. So what I'm going to do in the time that I've been given, hopefully it will not be too long, is to talk about three things, and I will share three slides. The first, I'll talk about the implications of digitalization on the workplace itself, and I will talk about some of the myths, and I will use that discussion about the myths as a way to help us see the other side of what technology can bring, not what it has been hyped out to bring, which most of the time doesn't, but I will also like to use that to talk about the things that we should expect and we should take advantage of from a technology point of view. And then I will also talk about what I think should be the future of the workplace. So, as Stacey said, COVID came unexpectedly. It came from nowhere. But what COVID, when we look back, while it brought a whole lot of distraction and a lot of pain, what it also gave us was an opportunity to fast track and to get a move on with regards to the decisions that companies were thinking about. So for a long time, and for the time that I've spent in corporate before I came into academia, there was this big talk about how the workplace needs to transform, how companies need to transform themselves, and how things had to be computerized, digitized, and how things were supposed to be digitalized in a short space of time. But that seemed to be taking years and years. And then when I was working for these multinational companies, we would go on and talk about things like companies are thinking of moving their spending from capex and to opex, and how they can move. It was all talk, but then COVID came, and all that talk had to be shifted away, and decisions had to be made on the fly. And one of those big decisions that was made, we really did not have an option, was to have an even more reliance on technology. But this reliance on technology came with some implications and with some patterns that I would like to focus on right now. We found that some companies were completely not ready, and because they were not ready, these companies ended up doing what we they were not even ready to do what we call digitization of the workplace. And for me, these are companies that were generally small. They were thinking of investing in technology and all of that, but they needed to digitize, and COVID gave them no option. They had to digitize, and digitization for me is the first step towards digital transformation. We can digitize things. It doesn't mean businesses change fundamentally. It doesn't mean that the workplace itself is impacted fundamentally. What happens is that what was analog now becomes computerized. It becomes digital. So basically, we stop pushing paper because, well, we can't even see each other. There's nothing physical to exchange. But what happened was that what can happen is that we can email things around. That does not really fundamentally change the game. It is only when we digitalize the company that things change. By digitalization, I mean, this is when we transform the processes within the organization. That's when the way the business works becomes reliant upon digital technologies that are within the company. We start impacting the processes of the company. So we moved from just moving things to digital, but we are moving processes to digitalization. And therein lies a real transformation opportunity that we were all thrust into. And then there is this golden happy place, which is the place of digital transformation that all companies pretend to be, some wish to be, some companies are there, but some companies are in a journey. And this is most companies that are serious about survival. They are moving towards digital transformation. So this is my what I call theory in the academic world, but this is what I would call the reality of how companies and technology is impacting. And thanks to COVID, most companies are now taking this as a fact. Companies are automating their processes. Companies are streamlining their processes because they have no choice, because something fundamentally has happened within the workplace. And hopefully companies will then use this as a journey to get to transform themselves and become new companies altogether. All right. So when I use these words, I just want you to keep that in mind, that when I talk about digitalization, I'm very specific. When I speak about digitization, I'm very specific. And when I talk about transformation, I'm being very specific. I don't see them as one and the same thing. So what are the myths? So as the companies do this, there is an embedded a supposition or presupposition that when we introduce technologies in the workplace, it's going to transform us, right? And it's an embedded supposition that people usually make when they get into the space of relying on technology to modernize and to fast track their company. However, I just want to highlight that based on the research that we do, and particularly with the research that we do with people that are mobile workers or gig workers, we're finding that it should not be taken for granted that digitalization will always be inclusive. Right? So when companies transform themselves, they should not assume that everyone will be on board. Some people get left out, and it is a work of human resource capabilities within the company to think deeply about, when we make these changes, when we introduce technologies, are we inclusive of everyone? It should not be assumed to be so. There's also an assumption that digitalization will give guaranteed benefits. It is not always the case. When we digitalize the company, and as we transform, as we move towards transforming the company to reach digital transformation, the benefits sometimes are not immediate and therefore require concerted strategies from HR, from finance, from all the other units within the company to work together to guarantee for the company what the benefits should be. There's also the misconception that when we digitalize and we are all working from home, or we're working on a hybrid format, people not in the office or coming into the office once a day, once a week, or 4 times a week, that the openness and trust will always be there. And our research also shows that this is not the case. What sometimes happens is that this processes, going online and talking about all these technologies that Stacey mentioned as well, Teams, Zoom, and so on and so forth, that actually trust is needed for those to work. So trust is a precursor. Trust does not come as a result of this. Trust needs to be there. So it's the work of the company to develop that trust, and not hope that technology will bring the trust that people are working when they are home and when we don't see them. Trust that people are sharing when we don't see them. Trust that people are communicating when we are not seeing them. Right? And the openness to say, to allow people to talk about not just work, but to talk about themselves as partners with the companies that they're working with, as employees, to talk about their problems, to talk about the fact that it's hard to work from home, to talk about the fact that children are now here and disturbing, to talk about the fact that I may not work, I may not be available at this time because I'm working from home, certain things are happening, and I can work, maybe later on, and the work will still get done. That type of openness is not guaranteed when we start changing the processes of the company. And also, there's this idea that, when companies digitalize, suddenly they become better, and the quality of the jobs that they offer will always be better because, we've moved online. This is not the case. What research also shows is that a lot of the companies, in fact, in one of the surveys that we did, it was almost half of the company staff were saying that their work has changed for the worst. and they were still doing exactly the same thing. And question was, if they're doing exactly the same thing, what changed? What happened? Was it because of COVID? And then they said, no, it's because, now that we are working from home, there's now more expectations about what I should be doing, things that I never used to do, or I end up taking a lot more time to do the work that I was. So the work has suddenly changed at the drop of a hat. So we need to be thinking as human resource, people, as well as technology people as well, to think about, do not always presuppose or take it for granted that the quality of the work suddenly improves, simply because we have moved on to an online platform. And finally, one of the major findings that we found in a separate study was this idea that we saw, particularly from management, a lot of techno-optimism. Now, I am a technology a professional. I am an academic in technology. I want, technology to grow and to be used everywhere. However, there's a sense in which technology can lead to unnecessary or dangerous optimism, right? That, because now we've got this new package, it's going to change everything, right? And this optimism leads to expectations that sometimes cannot be met, and sometimes expectations that result in a lot of heaviness and burdensome, effects on employees. So we need to be careful of this. And I hope by bringing this negative side, I'm also highlighting the fact that we can, get some positives out of it by guarding against techno-optimism and by being realistic about what technology does. Technology does not necessarily, it's not the magic wand. It is something that we need to work with, configure well, and understand that we need to invest in, and understand that there's processes to it, and understand that for it to work, it's a consultative, collaborative environment. When companies and leaders take that perspective into the work, things begin to change. Now, in closing, as I said, my third, I want to talk about what we should be focusing on, what we should be thinking of as the future of the workplace. I alluded earlier to the fact that the work has changed significantly, and some of the impacts are very obvious, some not so obvious. So it's obvious that we have moved on to hybridization of work. It is obvious that we have moved to, and we will never come back from it. Some people have even, physically, geographically moved to go to places they would have always wanted to go, but because of work they couldn't. But now, because of what COVID has done, people semi-migrated, emigrated, and people are also now, all over the world working from anywhere. And as that happens, we need to start thinking about how does this impact the company and what tools are necessary for the company to enable this new type of a worker. The other not so obvious change, but which many people would agree that is there, is the fact that the culture of the workplace and the generational changes that are brought about by the new generation are also impacting the workplace. And this generation is growing up differently. They're growing up in a world of technology, and they're growing up in a world where, there's all this uncertainty has been brought forth. So they don't take things for granted any longer. Not to say the generations before them took things for granted, but nothing like COVID had happened that would have made us to think so. And I'm saying us because I'm part of that generation. But this new generation that is coming up has seen how things can just change. And they don't take that for granted. It is always part of their calculus when they decide which companies to work for. And therefore, in the workplace, their attitude also changes, right? And now, the third problem that, and also a future consideration, is the fact that we are also introducing so many technologies into the workplace. And when these technologies come in, some of them, because of techno-optimism, are being thrown at workers, and they're causing this huge friction, what we call digital friction or workplace friction. And this friction is not necessarily physical friction, but it's friction in the sense that there's just too many things to worry about. There's a lot of noise pollution. There's a lot of, alerts and things to do and notifications and sounds, and all of this leads to a lot of pollution, which can negatively impact on wellness, which Stacey spoke about earlier. So we need to be thinking about how do we take these three major challenges: the hybrid worker, the worker that is faced with so many choices in technology that they could end up being drowned under health-wise. We need to be thinking about how all of these things can be mitigated by technology. Unfortunately, we are not left hopeless. There's technologies that are available, and I think some of them will be alluded to as we have a more one-on-one talk, that there are technologies that enable these types of strategies to be in place, where we can enable workers to work in a safe space, to work in a manner that's free, in a manner that is inclusive to everyone, in an equitable manner, in a manner that enables culture change and cultural shifts, in a manner that is humane, in a manner that is truly post-pandemic transformation and transformative. And that's really the main message that I want to. I am a researcher that looks at African solutions to African problems, and one of the philosophies that I would like to leave with us is the philosophy of Ubuntu, because every time when we think about what Ubuntu teaches us to be a lot more humane, even in the world which is mediated by technology and digitalization. Technology should never make us to forget that we are still humans and we control technology. And as humans, we need to create an environment that all humans can succeed in. And create environments that are understanding, that are hospitable, that are welcoming. And as we introduce technologies, or as we interact on technology, if that is the principles that we move with, we will be able to create winning workplaces and workplaces that are truly transformed. I thank you very much. I hand over back to you, Jesse.
Thank you so much, Peter, for that. I really appreciate that, and it was a very informative, short presentation. I think as you were talking about, there is a question that came into my mind. You were talking about, digitization, which then gives us responsibilities and all that. Then I had a question that I wanted to ask. In a setup maybe that you find within a workplace environment, how do you ensure that, because clearly it sounds like this shift in the way we understand the workplaces, it's not for everyone, because you have got the older folk that are usually laid back, you have the younger folk that embraces it and then that are pushing for it, and sometimes all they want is to deliver. Where they work from, how they do it, that's none of their business. But I had a question. If this is not for everyone, for example, let's say if I were to have all of my team members work from wherever they are, I'm sure I'm going to have different I'm going to achieve, or I'm going to see different results. And when I have realized that there are different results coming from my team because they are working from wherever they are, how do I get the message out that unfortunately X, you can enjoy the benefits of working from anywhere, but for Y and Z, you are not yet there. I think I would want you to be, maybe hybrid or full-time in the office. How do you approach such a scenario? Because the reality of the matter is you will find people that are not ready because their maturity levels are not yet there. Their productivity is also going to reflect. But how do you break that news to your employees with such a reality?
Yes. No, thanks for that question, Jasil. It's a very important one because, and again, I think it takes me back to the the misconceptions or the myths that I spoke about earlier. Not every solution will work for everyone. right? And this is true in life, and definitely, you know, with technology, the same is true, right? Not everyone should embrace, you know, digitalization to the same extent, and this is a very sensitive process, but that one that we are starting to become very comfortable with, because, you know, just as we were forced to hybridize work, we are also having to being faced with thinking about how do we also, you know, customize it to the different types of work. There's different types of work. You can start there, you know, as somebody who has to think up a solution. There's different types of work that by their nature require different approaches to hybrid work. Not everyone can work away from the office, and that should just be, you know, something obvious. But then also it needs to go to a personal level. You know, certain people, because of other, you know, challenges, preferences, and you know, limitations, may not be able to do hybrid, and some will be able to. This is a massive problem, a massive headache to any HR manager, right? Because they now have to, you know, deal with all of this. However, for me, what I think is the correct approach to this is an approach of understanding, an approach that is very strategic, that puts the well-being of the employee first, and that also balances that with the you know, the wellness of the health of the company ultimately. And when employees and employers talk, collaborate, they will ultimately find a solution. There is not, you know, cut and paste solution where, you know, I mean, a lot of consulting companies, I don't want to speak oddly of them or badly of them. You know, some of them, you know, may pretend that they can just, you know, come and drop a template for you. It doesn't always work that way. It is a work of, you know, one-on-one interactions, that openness and trust between people, and testing things and seeing what doesn't work. No one has got a perfect solution here. But what will happen is when people talk and test, try and test, we will get to that point where we know, you know, this particular Gen Z, you know, we will not just put them all in one bucket, or this particular one, you know, is different to the other one. And when we are open, you know, and we are able to talk about this, you know, we are able to find, you know, solutions that work, and we can convince each other to get. And I am by no way saying it's an easy process. It's a process that requires talking, collaborating, and testing, and making mistakes as well sometimes, and pulling back quickly when those mistakes. So, but you know, the idea of failing forward. You know, you fail, stand up and move on and say, well, that didn't work, let's try something else. That didn't work, let's try something else, until we find something that kind of works. I hope that clarifies.
So, Jasil, I think you're on mute.
You're on mute, Jasil. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I'm just following up. You see, this is the new reality that we face with sometimes yourself. But so I wanted to follow up with a question to Stacey. Maybe from an HR perspective, how do you ensure that when you give others certain opportunities to, you know, enjoy the benefits of modern workplace, and others may not be able to get because of, you know, certain things like maturity, productivity, and all that? How do you ensure that it's not going to be viewed as discrimination? Maybe that's the first question. Yeah, and then
I think if it comes to me, thanks, Jasil. I think from my side, it goes back to that slide I showed about trust. So the reality is that there needs to be a foundation. So it starts with the moment that you start recruiting people. So someone might have on paper all the skills you need, but you need to be able to also test those softer skills, those competencies, their ambition and drive, their will to want, their ability to work from home. And the thing is that if you put in the right processes, right, to present and give to people, again, it's inclusive. It's not an up-down approach. It can't just be this dictatorship that we used to know of. It's about, how do you lead? How do you engage? How do you interact with people? As Pitso said earlier, as much as we would love to just say, oh, we'll rely on the system, it's got to come down to, how do we equip people to use a system? How do we get their buy-in? How do we make them included, but then also give them direction? How do we put in the right KPIs, the right performance measurables that are tangible, not logging onto the system? Cool, you did that 3 times, 5 points to you, thumbs up. It's about how do we actually draw them in and engage them and let them buy into it to think that it's their idea, not manipulate them to think that it's their idea. It's how do we give them information that becomes quantifiable, that they can refer back to, and how do we give them the time of day? So we can't just say, here's a system, here's a Google, here's a Zoom, or a what's what I'm looking for, a YouTube video. How do we sit and engage and train people? How do we empower them to understand the system, to see the benefits? And it's not, again, as I say, there's not this up-down approach, because get them involved, ask them questions, do surveys. Communication doesn't have to be, let's sit in a room and talk about feelings from an HR point of view. And if it was that, and if it was only that, then we wouldn't be making an impact, because we have to play both sides of the coin, what's right for the business and what's right for the employee. But the reality is, when you speak about not discriminating, companies and leaders and business owners and heads of department have to be very, very sure on what their recruitment process is, because that's where the life cycle of an employee starts. Don't bring somebody in that you're going to set up for failure because they don't have that skill set. They don't have that personality to do it. Don't expect somebody that has a personality to be an influencer to be very task driven, because you're setting them up for failure. So somebody that needs accountability, needs extra TLC. If you want to run a successful business, you're going to work with different personalities. You also have to understand those people and provide them with the guidance so that you don't have to go down a route of discipline where you don't feel that they fit into what needs to happen. There has to be an alignment from day dots.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I do have a question that has been asked on the chat group. It says, how can we ensure that digitalization will improve efficiency? That question one, I think there is a question that goes along with this. I think I would rather ask those two, and then you can respond to those, I think in, what do you call it, in together. I think you have also touched on this. It says also, what are the benefits of digitalization in workplaces? So the first one is, how do we ensure that digitalization will improve efficiency? Then the other one, it says, what are some of the benefits of digitalization in workplaces? So that.
Yeah. So yeah, let's take the first one. That's really straightforward. So the benefits of digitalization, so the intended benefits as well as actual benefits is another story. So let me talk about the intended benefits and the benefits that some, because not all companies will get the same benefits from the same thing. So as we digitalize companies, the idea behind it, is that we want efficiencies. Right. So we want companies to work, faster, and to be able to be more responsive, and to be able to have quick turnarounds on processes that they are busy with, whether it's in manufacturing or marketing or whatever. But the digitalization is supposed to give us these types of efficiencies. And by and large, a lot of companies do report a lot of benefits in terms of efficiencies. Yeah. So a clear example would be, how, when COVID hit and people had to work from home, that, who knew that companies would not collapse, right? When people just left, who knew, if we spoke about it before COVID and somebody said, well, companies have to close down and maybe people can work from home, for instance, if you ever said that to a CEO before COVID, they would have said, no ways, right? But thanks to the technology, what we saw was that thanks to the foresight of workplace development as well as technology development, that companies found that their systems were able to enable workers to work from wherever they were, and that brought about, at least carried, the efficiencies that companies could offer, and it enabled companies to survive. The one other major benefit, intended benefit of digitalization is cost reductions. Right, manual processes are costly, they're slow, they are inefficient. When we digitalize, we want to bring down costs of doing something. So it brings down cost of communication, it brings down cost of doing business overall, and also the pace. Also, if we can deliver things faster, we also save on cost. And one other benefit of digitalization, obviously, is to break down the silos, right, within companies. So I think I'll focus on that. So when we break down silos, it means that processes, because with digitalization you have to be intentional about how processes now work, because you have to build them into a system, right? So now we have those workflows that have to be we have to be very intentional about how the workflows go, from HR to FI to marketing and all of that. And that intentionality in itself brings down costs, and it also brings up efficiencies, but it also shatters the walls that we tend to build around ourselves. So that, I would say, are the major standard benefits. What companies, as I said, not necessarily all companies benefit from this. Companies understand this, and some companies choose and pick what works for themselves. And maybe to answer the question directly, it depends on the strategic intent of the company, what they want to achieve from the process of digitalization, because that intent also drives what types of products that company is going to get on board, right?
Okay.
If your problem is in HR, there it is. Your problem is HR. Then you need to find an HR solution. If your problem is cost, you need a finance solution of some sort. If your problem is, inability to convert leads, to close deals, there we go. You need a CRM system. It could do that, and it needs to be built to do that. So that, for me, is a straightforward answer to the question about what should the benefits be, or what are the benefits. That's what digitalization aims to do. Now, the second part of the question, just remind me again. I'm trying to retrieve it in my memory, but I think I've just went on and on.
I think you did answer that, because it was talking about the benefits, and then there is a comment that came from one listener who says, I believe organizations need to create work from anywhere programs and practices that are more open and inclusive, such as putting heavier concentration of virtual learning programs and virtual networking and mentoring opportunities. In doing so, they can create an equitable environment in which both remote and in-office employees can equally engage and collaborate in a transparent and efficient way, and make meaningful contributions that fuel innovation and business growth. I like the aspect that is bringing into this dimension, to say that there should be that strategic intent that, Peter, you were talking about, to say, as an organization, we look at the mix of our employees, then we would be able to build tools as well as capabilities that we then know they will be able to support, whether one is working from home or wherever they are, or they're on site. And in so doing, I think that helps to equip, and that also accelerate that growth that we're talking about. Because sometimes the reason why some may not be able to work from home or wherever, I think it's purely because they are inexperienced. They always need to have someone by themselves that, if they fail to do what they wanted to do, they can always reach out to them and do that. I wanted to go and ask, there's a question. It says, looking at South Africa compared to the rest of the world, how are we effectively embracing digitalization in workplaces? I just wanted to answer that maybe in short. Recently this week, I saw on the TV news, they were talking about there are trials that are going to be done in terms of 4-day work, which is something which is like a buzzword, which is in, and it's here. I also picked it up in News 24. They're talking about it. In terms of the HR Indawa that I attended, I think 2 weeks ago, they spoke about it, and everyone is really interested in knowing what's going on. And we're also talking about, the things to do with your quiet quitting and, quiet, firing, which is the things that are actually trending in a worldwide web. And we see those things happening, but to say they have been happening only now after COVID, maybe it may be an overstatement. It may be something that has already been happening, but it's just that now it is getting more publicity and all that. And the reason why we are talking about this issue around workplaces, modern workplace, it shows that as part of the, the global, space place where we belong in South Africa, we have noticed that things are changing. We are becoming more and more, representing South Africa in a global space. You have people that are sitting in South Africa, but their employers, they are maybe somewhere in Europe, in Asia, or all that kind of stuff. And all that says to us that there is something that is going on that never used to happen. And this all is actually being pushed from a global perspective. So I think maybe I'll give you each 1 minute, and so that you can respond to that. I need to go to the next question, but I just need to give you 1 minute each just to respond. How do you think as South Africa we fare in terms of the digitalization in workplaces?
So I think from my side, the reality is it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you're running a successful business, you need to be able to understand what your objective and your purpose is to be able to deliver. So I think what's happening is because people have been exposed to so much more being with COVID and seeing that it's a worldwide impact. It wasn't just one country. I think that has now impacted countries like South Africa or like India to now start realizing if we want to compete and we want to be there and guys want to invest in our business who are international, we need to start like meeting the curve and coming up to where they are. And that happens with us looking to digitize, looking to streamline, looking to do things more efficient. But what companies need to remember is when they're doing that, it's not just I need to do it and bring in a system and then slap a system in. There needs to be understanding, and there needs to be a lot of step by step and taking your time to develop it, because then all you're doing is putting a plaster over a problem and not actually being impactful. And then you aren't going to be globally competitive. So I think it's about understanding an objective, identifying your objective, the purpose, why you're doing something, and doing something with intent. Because companies like Google didn't just throw things together. There was an intention and a purpose, and then they put in the systems to support it.
Okay, I didn't know that 1 minute is this long. Yes,
yeah. So I'm very encouraged. As I said, currently my way into a lot of the workplaces is through the surveys that we do and the research that I do with the digital gig workers. And my impressions based on that, not that I've done an overarching, nationwide survey on this, that's not true. But what I found is that I can see a lot of companies thinking hard about, how to embrace this change. I see a lot of companies agonizing. I see a lot of, a lot of my colleagues, within, organizational psychology space and organizational science, they're getting a lot of queries from companies say, how do we do this? Tell us who to speak to about how to do this, the types of changes. There is, a worldwide survey that was done, beginning of this year, which I was reading. I'm sure there's many others that I didn't see, and it was ranking South Africa quite favorably it was because it was all global. In Africa, I think South Africa was a leader in terms of companies that were able to survive, COVID by using digitalization strategies, by allowing people to work from home and by enabling them. There is one specific research that I'm doing with one of my students, and my minute is about to go, and we are looking at digital nomadism. Right now, digital nomadism is this whole idea of young people particularly, but not just themselves exclusively, but being nomads, choosing to go to Portugal and working for a South African company and just living there and living their best life and still doing their work. And what that study showed to us, what was interesting, was that these types of digital nomads actually end up working even a lot more because they feel a lot more loyalty to the company that enables them to work from anywhere. They are a lot more committed to that company. So, which is something that we found quite interesting. It was a small sample of 300 digital nomads, but I think it tells us something.
Great.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, I think it's something that is coming. Digital nomads are there, and they want things done in certain ways. And one of the things that I've heard from some of my colleagues and some of my friends is these days you find in a workplace, I think it's Generation Z, that they would love to work while they are listening to something, watching a movie, and to some of the elderly folk, it doesn't sit well with them. But these are some of the things that we need to talk about. How do we grapple
100%.
such
It's
issues?
like exactly, you can't watch a movie with subtitles and be on your cell phone, because then you miss the first scene and you might as well just stop watching. So I think that's exactly the case. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think from a people point of view is where South Africa does, where South Africa was always seen as the disadvantage because of levels of education. I think that's drastically changing, because a lot of people are driven, and employees nowadays aren't necessarily only driven by money. They're also driven by, show me an environment where I'm included, show me an environment where I can grow, and show me what that growth is so I can get my hands dirty and learn more. And they're not going to do that by sitting and listening to somebody anymore. They're going to do that by engaging with systems.
Okay, thank you so much. Guys, I am very much impressed. When things are beginning to heat up, all of a sudden you realize that you only have 3 minutes left. I realized
when you're having fun, Jasil.
Yes, there's so many questions that is asked. What we will do is we will answer those questions in the invitation link that we had, so that we can continue having those conversations. But just before we go, I just wanted us to listen to the last video, and all that we were talking about. You might be wondering what does that have to do with us. It has to do with, as a company, we do offer solutions that speak to the same realities that we were talking about, and these will be able to allow us to build in tools, capabilities that will help us to monitor our employees, measure their performance, onboard them, be able to pay them. So I think there is the video that I just wanted us to play, so that as we conclude, then we can have an idea what we are talking about.
The new normal requires businesses to streamline their HR strategies, payroll processes, and onboarding with a people management tool that provides employees with a meaningful work experience. AR Smart Ideas offers businesses human experience management using our SuccessFactors solution to optimize employee performance and talent management. Our SuccessFactors tool helps businesses accurately assess performance, secure employee data, support employee well-being, and retain talent. Contact AR Smart Ideas and optimize your HR strategy with human experience management.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. That marks the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us, like our page, respond to whatever you want, and then we should be able to set some demo, whatever that you want, in order for us to have you, picture and assist in all that. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jasil. Thanks, Pitso. That was great.
Thanks, everyone. Wonderful, Stacey. Thanks, Jasil.
Bye, guys.
And the team. Bye-bye.